A warning, this podcast contains content some listeners may find confronting or distressing. Listener discretion is advised.
9 podcasts.
Coming along Edward Street and I seen Dean and I waved to him and he said, the police have left out some key pieces of evidence. And he said that the knife that they got is not the right knife. So I said, what are you going to do with that? I said, are you going to tell the police? He said, no.
Just when you thought this all couldn't get any more confusing or dramatic, we hear that. A wild claim police may have missed a second knife. Police were told about it almost 2 years after the deadly events at Alva Beach, when attention had turned to the inevitable Coronial inquest. A crucial part of that process was internal investigators digging into how everything was handled. And true to form for this case, it threw up that shocking curveball.
What do you recall about him talking about the knife, what it looked like, where he found it?
Heading up that internal investigation was Detective Senior Sergeant Naomi Lockhart. She was tasked with scrutinising the response from police and also paramedics.
And whether the response was consistent with authorised policies, practices and procedures.
Considering all the jaw-dropping failures you've already heard, you can appreciate she had quite the job ahead of her. You'll hear a lot from Naomi Lockhart this episode, as we delve into the internal police probe into who was to blame for the botched response.
And whether earlier intervention by the Queensland Police Service may have prevented the deaths of Thomas Ian Davy and or Corey James Christensen. So you understand what
So who was at fault? It's a question that, in many ways, pitted police against paramedics.
They want us to hold their hand, most jobs.
And, quite remarkably, police call takers against the local cops.
How long are they going to be? They said, they're telling half an hour. I said, I think they need to pull their finger out, because how many calls do they need?
But for those who lost the most that night, they've got no interest in entertaining a blame game. To them, they're all at fault.
Had they come when they were called for a sore shoulder, nothing would have happened. The police let them down and the ambulance service let them down.
I'm Adam Hegarty. Welcome back to Alva Beach, Death at the Door. This is episode 5, Code 3 and a Second Knife.
Speaking.
Oh, hi, is that Scott Willeen?
Yeah, that's me.
Naomi from the police. Scott, how you doing?
This call was made in June 2020, almost 2 years after the deadly night at Alva Beach, and just months before a coronial inquest. You're hearing from Naomi Lockhart here. The other voice on the call is Scott Warleen.
So on the 17th of May, I had a discussion with Dean Webber. Now,
An Alva Beach local who, before now, has had absolutely nothing to do with this case. But he's put himself right under the spotlight after a chance encounter with none other than Dean Webber a few months earlier. And what he claims Dean told him, suddenly and unexpectedly, flips the internal investigation on its head.
I was coming along Edward Street and I seen Dean and I waved to him and then we pulled up at the Caltex servo about 9:30 at night.
Okay.
And we were just talking about anything and she said, you all good? And he had a joke and he's like, my lawyer said I'm all good. And he said, the police have left out some key pieces of evidence. And I said, what would that be, your phone? And that, he said, no, they still got my phone. And I said, what's that then? And he said that the knife that they got is not the right knife. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, it was just, we were cleaning up on the beach the other day. They got obviously where it happened down Alva Beach. Me and my mates were cleaning up and we found this knife and I recognised it. I said, what do you mean you recognise it? He said that was the knife that was used when he had them 2 blokes. I said, what are you going to do with that? I said, are you going to tell the police? He said, no, he is advised not to, and he was giving it to his lawyer, and that was literally it. And after I spoke to him, I made sure I ran into Justin and I thought it would be appropriate to tell him, you know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
But that's just what he's...
This is one of those many moments in this case that raises an eyebrow. I don't want to sound insensitive here, but it's almost like a soap opera sometimes. It'd be a classic small town scenario if there wasn't the context of something so devastating. All the people involved here have crossed paths before. Justin, mentioned by Scott in that call, is Justin Luke, our officer on scene that night. He already knew Scott. They've even since worked for the same security company. Scott was also an acquaintance of Dean. They were cadets together. And Scott also knows our lead detective in this case, Gavin Neal. They've had, let's call them, run-ins with each other before. And Gavin Neal quickly dismissed this idea of a second knife as nonsense. At the inquest, he described Scott as the least likely person you'd believe. Here's a direct quote. He stages things and manipulates things and makes false complaints, and I would not believe one thing. When I put it to Gavin back at Alva Beach, his opinion certainly hadn't changed.
I've basically found out where that had come from on the day of the inquest.
Well, that's obviously Scott Warleen and Lachlan Allegri, isn't it, where they talk about having crossed paths with Dean at the servo.
Yeah.
I know you've had your not so pleasant dealings with Scott in the past.
Yeah.
Lachlan seems like a pretty upstanding member of the community though.
Yeah.
Do you completely dispute what they had to say?
Oh, 100%. 100%, yeah.
Why do you think Dean would have mentioned a second knife?
I disagree that he would have even mentioned that.
Okay.
I really do.
I mentioned another man, Lachlan here, because he was with Scott at the servo when that conversation about the second knife allegedly happened. And unlike Scott, Lachlan wasn't known to police.
Hello?
Hi, is that Lachlan?
Yes, this is Lachlan speaking.
Hi, Lachlan. It's Naomi Lockhart from the police in Brisbane. How are you?
So Lachlan adds some weight to the claims. And in his call with the police investigator, he backs up Scott's story. He also heard Dean talk about a second knife.
Yeah, if it's a knife situation you're talking about, apparently his uncle or something was cleaning up the hut or something and they found the one he was using or used or something like that. I'm not entirely sure if it is or not. That's what he said. And that's what he said. His lawyer said not to bloody say something like that or thing. I don't know if the details on it.
The case when he met with me. What do you recall about him talking about the knife, what it looked like, where he found it,
how
it got to the lawyer, all that?
Well, no, he didn't really give us any details. It just said that he said his uncle's just found it and that's all.
How do you know it was the knife?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. He just said it was the knife thing.
The knife.
Maybe he remembers the details himself specifically, but he just said a knife. He just said it was a kitchen knife, and that's the only details he really said.
When it come to talking about the knife and stuff, I said, how could they have misplaced that? And
This is Scott again, going into strikingly specific detail.
That night that the stuff happened at Alva Beach, there was like a little coffee table near the kitchen that he placed the knife on. He said that he used, and he put the knife there, and then he indicated to whoever it was, I don't know, that was the knife. But then he said that when we were cleaning up, he said they haven't got the right knife. And I instinctively told him, "Are you going to say something?" Isn't that? He said no. He was told not to. And I thought, oh, okay.
Told not to by his lawyer.
Yeah.
Did he say who his lawyer was, Scott?
It's an extraordinary accusation. When I started looking into this evidence, it's one of the first things that shocked me. And considering the investigator, Naomi Lockhart, made the effort to call the two men who saw Dean and made the claims, it's clearly something that captured her attention enough to be taken seriously. Internal investigation documents do reveal police looked back over the existing evidence, and in the end were satisfied the knife police seized on the night was the weapon used. Dean's lawyers were also questioned, and both denied categorically having this supposed second knife in their possession. Later at the inquest, it's mentioned only in passing, and police were never asked about it on the stand, not by lawyers or the coroner. That all leads us to the obvious conclusion that it was considered so far-fetched, it eventually wasn't taken seriously. It's all incredibly odd. It's also, though, just a tiny part of the internal investigation. For Naomi Lockhart, the investigator, the focus just had to be on the disastrous, delayed response from police and paramedics on the night Tom Davy and Corey Christensen died. Unique to everything else in this case, that horrible delay is something that's easy to pick apart and criticise, especially for the Davy and Christensen families. How have you handled being back this time around?
As best we can. Driving in was very emotional. Approaching the house was traumatic. It's not something that we've wanted, we haven't wanted to do that, but we have done it.
Heather and Neil Davy have had to come to terms with a lot over the years. The death of their son Tom is just the start. Maybe most heartbreakingly, they're living with the knowledge their son could still be here if police and paramedics didn't fail him so catastrophically. How often have you actually come back here?
This is the second time, isn't it, that we've come back here.
So you haven't been back for quite a few years?
No.
How is that experience for you now, all those years on, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what we know now, it's still, we're not as naive as we were back then. Back then we had faith in the system.
The couple can't stand Alva Beach for too long. It's too painful. But they came back here for this podcast because they're desperate to be heard any way they can manage. They, of course, knew they'd need to brace for being where their son died. They didn't think they'd learn something new about Tom's agonising final moments. Has it been what you expected, being back here, seeing where your boy died?
I've been worried about it, but I didn't really have I knew it would be horrible, but it's how do you vision it?
Yeah, we've just come from talking to Andrew Heron, who was the first on scene, and tried to help Tom, and that was extremely emotional. Seeing him and hearing, what Tom's last words were. He was thanking Andrew for stopping to help him, and he was saying, I don't want to die. So it was pretty bad.
And you had never heard that before?
No, not at all. So it was a very emotional,
But he's the only one that helped, in the whole system.
He saw the ambulance.
Only good person.
He said he saw the ambulance, he could see the ambulance. And he was on the phone to the comms saying, I'm the only one here, send the ambulance. And still they didn't do it.
And this is a fisherman helping your son when there's paramedics up the road and police nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. No one else, just him there.
What does he think about that all these years? We know one of the biggest failures was the decision to go and get an opposition to bail application signed instead of responding immediately. But really, that's only part of it. There were so many people, police, paramedics, 000 operators, who contributed to not getting there in time, to not just save Tom and Corey, but stop any violence to begin with. So even among professional emergency services, there was a lot of finger pointing going on. And you're about to hear some alarming insight into that. This has never been played publicly.
I have a twofold responsibility. I'm investigating on behalf of the coroner of the police. I'm also investigating on behalf of the Office of the State Coroner.
It's Naomi Lockhart interviewing then Senior Constable Michael Arope, who was helping to oversee the 000 call centre when Dean's panicked calls came through that night.
They come in, say this job in particular was a QAS job. It came through on the system, so it was no phone call to us. It was just came through the ambulance to go to, they had someone falling off a quad bike.
This interview goes for an hour and 40 minutes. It's so rare to hear this sort of thing, how police and paramedics operate behind the scenes. It goes into the decisions made that night by all involved. The key failure in Lockhart's crosshairs is the decision to keep the Alva Beach job as a Code 3 in the system. So when Dean's first call came into the Queensland Ambulance Service,
I've just had an injured lady knock on my door asking for help.
It was categorised as a Code 3, which, as you'll hear, is effectively a low priority emergency, and barely even that.
Whatever, there's people waiting outside.
So, yeah, those people that are out front,
mate, can you go? Get off my property, mate.
So Despite Dean's repeated, frightened pleas,
All right, mate, are you safe where you are?
No, I'm not safe.
No, all right, yeah, we're getting the police as well.
the job in the system was simply not regarded as serious enough for police to drop what they're doing and rush to Dean's home.
We really don't have to go. Someone's fallen off a bike. It's not on a road. They've said just someone's fallen off a buggy. They can go pick them up, take them to the hospital. It's not for us to go to.
And even as more information came through,
I need police now. Now, they're breaking in.
the job remained a low priority for police in the system until after 2 men had been stabbed.
No, just please send someone, please. Please, me.
So with this job in particular, the one we're talking about today, at what stage should it have been declared a Code 2 and get those crews there sooner rather than later, now that you've read through the log?
I actually, just looking at it, I don't think it was a Code 2 till we knew there was actually someone stabbed. Before that was people outside then trying to get in, then they've gone away, come back, and they're all drunk. I think if they just had got their Code 3, it would have been okay. If the ambulance had gone in when they initially got the call, would have been okay. Like, obviously it was a 2 when they said there's people lying on the side of the road, not bleeding out. Because that's when the information came in.
Now, here's where it gets intriguing. You'll hear Senior Constable Arope jump back and forth between who to blame. He criticises police.
Half an hour said, I think they need to pull their finger out, because how many calls do they need?
Then, moments later, he's pointing the finger at paramedics.
QAS is staging. What does that mean?
They're going to wait for us.
Yeah. Does that happen often?
Happens every job, just about for them.
Okay. You weren't aware why, or?
Why? Because they said there's people there. They want us to hold their hand, most jobs. That's why. There's people there other than their patient.
And you're saying that happens often?
99% of the time for their jobs.
Okay. And knowing what you've said earlier, it's a good 20 minutes for police to get to the address. How do you reason that if someone's injured and obviously needs ambulance attention?
Well, the QA should go. And like I said, we didn't say that there's people there and all that. Like, really, we probably wouldn't even have gone. We'd have just let them go, pick up the patient, take them to the hospital. So, sort of like a patient.
The Queensland Ambulance Service has strongly disputed that assessment, this idea that they just wanted their hands held. In fact, the lawyer representing paramedics at the inquest wrote this to the coroner before she handed down her findings. Due to the nature of Mr Webber's first 000 telephone call to the QAS, there was ample justification for the paramedics to be staged until the QPS, that's Queensland Police, could attend and ensure the scene was safe. It goes on to say that even the idea of paramedics doing a drive-by was, quote, not a safe option in the circumstances. The debate here about who should have gone in clearly shows a breakdown in communication between police and ambulance crews. And it's worth noting, one eventual finding from the Coronial inquest was that issue needed to be urgently fixed.
Busy night. So when it comes to a busy night, grand final night, as you just alluded to, just to be clear, you're saying that QAS is saying to you, we're going to stage. And do they say where they stage, or
no? Their stage could be at their station having a cup of tea, which is often the case.
Okay. So they're not going until police attend at the same time, is that right?
But a lot of the times they do, because they'll get sick of waiting and they'll go. And then they'll type on the job, patient was compliant, QPS can disregard.
So is there a rule on that, or is there
No, it's just up to
system?
them. It's just up to them, because you might have a big burly ambo that's ex-military, or you might have 2 girls, you might have whatever. It just depends how they feel comfortable. Because you'll go to, say, drug ones, and they're happy to go in and treat them, where others say, it's a druggy house, let's wait for police. So it's up to the individual.
Let's bring back the Davy family's lawyer, Julia Jasper. Despite the blame being thrown around here, to her, they're pretty much all at fault.
Car crash of events. It wasn't one thing that went wrong that led to Tom and Corey dying. It was so many things went wrong. If you take any one of them out of the chain of causation, it doesn't happen. If the police respond to the 000 and if there wasn't confusion about the level of danger involved, if the ambulance had been able to move from where they were staged, you know, we know now from what you guys have discovered over the last couple of days that Tom would have been able to see the ambulance, you know, when he was dying. You know, so there were so many opportunities where tragedy could have been averted.
Do you sit here with the belief that the system failed the Davies?
I think it could have worked better. You know, I think that there were certainly failings that were acknowledged in the inquest about the events that happened last night with the emergency services response. You know, I think that if you're stabbed and bleeding to death and you can see the ambulance, then I think probably something's gone wrong.
My nightmares of Tom lying there alone. There's an ambulance just at the corner, and still they didn't come. Like they didn't come. Had they come when they were called for a sore shoulder, nothing would have happened. They would have gone in, done their job, taken Candace to hospital, but they didn't do that. They let everyone down. The police let them down, and the ambulance service let them down. I have no doubt in my head about that at all.
You've heard why the paramedics didn't rush in. They, rightly or wrongly, didn't feel safe without police. And we know one of the main reasons police didn't come is lead detective Gavin Neal instead opted to get paperwork signed to keep an offender locked up at the Air Police Station. In looking into how police failed, Naomi Lockhart presses the call centre operator, Michael Arote, on that point.
They should have, if they wanted, they should have rung their boss and said, hey, can we get someone to come and overtime sit on our prisoner because we've got a job out at Alva Beach.
So in any typical scenario, we've got a junior crew, just one crew working at Air, and they required an emergency response. It wouldn't be the case that Townsville would send crews from Townsville down to Air.
No.
So the responsibility lies with the Air station to recall people to duty.
Yeah.
Okay.
The most senior officer there that night was Gavin Neal, a man who's told us, you'll recall, he'd hesitate to do that because of overtime on a public holiday.
To ring up the district duty officer and say, I want to call someone out on overtime at a quadruple time day to deal with a Code 3 job, he would have said, no way in the world.
Just staggering.
So to be clear then, with this particular job from Alva Beach, the responsibility in managing that job lies with who?
Basically, like we're told, once you dispatch it, it's up to the crew to manage. And like I said, I felt sorry for the young crew. I don't know how they have one crew on a grand final night.
Yeah. Hindsight's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, but even still, like I worked at Munningborough before I went to the AP, and on our roster guy on a grand final night would have a 6P crew, an 8P crew. A station like this should have more than one crew on.
So let's talk about hindsight in that respect.
Yeah.
If they had have been another crew,
if they had a 6P or an 8P, if they weren't tied up, or if they were tied up sort of doing a noise complaint, bang, they'd be going to that, because QA's assist would be higher priority.
And you believe that they would have got that job like they did and been in the car and off they went?
I reckon they would have gone and they said, QAS, you're safe to come in. Yeah, the girl's here. But I also think if QAS turned up with their lights on, anyone who was banging on their door would have just said, oh, let's piss off. Airbo's here.
Even a drive-by, but yeah, like I said, hindsight's a wonderful thing. So what's your thought processes then on how it's being handled, how it's being managed, insofar as your role compared to their role? What do you think?
Well, their role, if they think they're going to get tied up, they should be ringing their boss. I think they've been put in a bad situation why they're the only ones on, myself, on a grand final night.
It's a sentiment backed up by Justin Luke, the officer called in while off duty that night.
And they were very inexperienced crews.
So there's two of them, Noel and Hayley.
How communication and arguably admin failures can be blamed for two people's lives not being saved is seriously frustrating.
Hayley hadn't even been in the job a year, and Noel, I can't remember exactly, maybe a couple of years. I said, if there's a call out tonight, you're calling me out because it's a public holiday tomorrow. And, you know, I used to joke about, if there's a murder, the police won't approve overtime on a public holiday.
As a senior member of that police station, can you explain to me why there was such a awful delay to getting there and helping those people?
You know, when I got into the police station, the first thing I said to Noel is, "Where's Gavin? Where's Hayley?" I said, "What? Like, people have been stabbed. Like, where are they? Are they gone to the job?" And I was just horrified when Noel said they're out getting paperwork signed. Look, I don't want to be critical of the police, but it doesn't sound very good. I mean, I shouldn't have been the first one back. I mean, I had to get dressed, I had to get my boots on. You know, they're in a car, and I mean, you've probably driven around there. Everything's 2 or 3 minutes within town. And then it's not like we didn't know, you know, what was going on. We were reading the job card ourselves. We were actually reading, you know, people have been stabbed. We didn't know if anyone had died or what the situation was, but we knew that people had been stabbed and potentially fighting for their lives. And someone's off getting paperwork signed. But I think lots of things could have been done differently. Even going back to the first job that was called in, it was clearly someone had been injured, needed QAS's help. It sounded urgent on that first call. You know, why didn't we go to it and sort that issue out? And I think if police had been out there straight away, then, you know, maybe this chain of events wouldn't have unfolded. The QAS officers, why did their hierarchy tell them not to drive past? Because it just makes no common sense not to have a van that looks like a police car drive past.
So do you think had police and paramedics acted differently that night, those two men would still be here?
Oh, I think so. Dean may have never met them, you know, Corey and Tom. Police would have driven past, police would have been there to diffuse any potential situation. Absolutely. But unfortunately, police, you know, didn't respond in time. And there's really no good reason for it.
I mentioned earlier, the coroner made a ruling on the police and paramedic response. It's one of the few things she was exceptionally scathing of. She found that it was very likely the situation could have been de-escalated and the deaths could have been prevented if paramedics or police responded sooner. And she's specific about that. She blames that on keeping the job out of Code 3 and Gavin Neal's decision to prioritise the prisoner paperwork. The coroner also ruled that more training was required at emergency call centres. I'm relieved to report that did happen, and coding rules were also changed. Clearly they just had to get that done, especially when you consider what the call centre operator has to say here.
So how could this have been managed better from the outset in your mind? You know, whose responsibility should it have been? Could it have been? What could have been done?
Well, personally, this is sort of my opinion is purely rostering. Ambo's going to their job for a look if they feel unsafe. I mean, they're in a car, their door's locked, drive away and say, yeah, we do need you here. And that could have pushed up on you and said, hey, Ambos have called us, you need to get there now, work it out amongst yourselves. But obviously, it's, to me, this whole job, it's still locked with that young girl. She knew what was going on. and hasn't probably explained it to this young kid. Because she obviously knew one or two of them or whatever, had been partying with them, whatever, and might have told him a different story and said they're trying to do this to her or whatever, and he's trying to protect her.
That pricks your ears up, doesn't it? The emergency response failure aside, plenty of people caught up in this case hold Candice Locke and Louis Bengoa responsible for a lot that went wrong that night. Turns out, even this police officer has come to the same conclusion.
I think she's got a lot to answer for.
In the next episode, how much blame do you put on Louis and Candice? Hear Candice's own evidence in never-released recordings.
There was a lot of commotion, honestly, I was sitting in the kitchen kind of head down, trying not to get noticed. Then I don't know how, but Dean actually got them back outside and he was freaking out. He's like, I think I've killed someone.
While the other surviving witness, Louis, admits to outright lies.
But I can't stand to even look at him now. I don't want nothing to do with him.
I'll take you inside a Cairns courthouse for the dramatic Coronial inquest.
Coroner Bentley calling Louis Bengoa an unreliable and unhelpful witness.
And that Mr Bengoa basically lied to Tom and Corey.
But under cross-examination, Candice was forced to admit that may have been an exaggeration.
Do Louis and Candice hold the answers?
Mr Bengoa, is there anything you'd like to say to Corey and Tom's family?
No comment.
Alva Beach, Death at the Door is a 9 podcasts and 60 minutes production. Written and presented by me, Adam Hegarty. The producer is Jess Lodge. Editing and sound design by Maddie White.